This video is about my favorite producer, Chris Thomas. Although he hasn't produced as many artists as some, the records he was involved with and the range of music really make him stand out. He was born 13th of January 1947 in Perivale in Middlesex, England. As a child he was classically trained on the violin and piano. Later he began playing bass in London bands, at one stage turning down the opportunity to play with Jimi Hendrix and Mitch Mitchell before Jimmy got famous. After several years he concluded he didn't really want to be a performing musician because being in a band one is dependent on many other people, and he wanted to be in studios, not playing live. His recording studio's break came in 1967 when he got the job as an assistant at George Martin's company Air. In 1968, George Martin went on holidays and Chris substituted for him on some of the sessions for the Beatles on their self-titled album, also known as the White Album. He produced 2 tracks on that album, Birthday and Happiness is a Warm Gun, and also played on 4 other songs. He wasn't credited on this album, but his name is on the original session sheets. He also produced 4 songs on the 1969 album Abbey Road. At the end of 1968, he got his first solo production credit on the album The Climax Chicago Blues Band by the Climax Blues Band. He produced another 3 albums for them after this. After this he started working with Procol Harum and produced a number of albums for them. During a trip to the United States, he met John Cale and was invited to produce his album Paris 1919. At one of the Procol Harum sessions, he met Brian Ferry and was asked to produce Roxy Music's second album, For Your Pleasure. He also produced their next 4 albums. In 1973, he got the task of mixing Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Most of the recording of that album was engineered by Alan Parsons. Around this time he produced 3 albums for Badfinger, starting with As in 1973. In 1976 he was asked by Malcolm McLaren to produce the Sex Pistols. Bill Price was also hired by Malcolm. Originally the idea was Chris producing some singles and Bill some album tracks. I will quote Bill Price explaining this. The simple fact of the matter was that Chris was hired by Malcolm to do a series of singles for the Sex Pistols. I was hired by Malcolm to do a series of album tracks with the Sex Pistols. Life got slightly complicated because I did a few album tracks that Chris remade as singles. Also, Chris started a couple of tracks which got abandoned as singles, which I remade to be used as album tracks. On quite a large number of songs, when we finished the album, we had 2 versions of the song. I couldn't quite understand why Malcolm kept chopping and changing between different versions of different songs. It slowly dawned on Chris and myself that Malcolm was trying to slip between 2 stools and not pay Chris or me. So we said, I'll tell you what, Malcolm, whatever's on the Sex Pistols album, it was either done by me or Chris, and you can pay us and we'll divvy it out amongst our little selves. Which is what we did. But it did force that very strange credit, simply because the sleeve was printed long before it was finally decided which version of each individual song was on the record. If we'd known, it would have said produced by Bill Price or produced by Chris Thomas. That's how you end up with that credit, produced by Bill Price or Chris Thomas. He programmed and played Moog synthesizer on David Bowie's first albums, the song Son of My Father by Chicory Tip, Leonard Cohen's songs of Love and Hate, and on George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. He has done a lot of work with Elton John, starting with producing the album The Fox in 1981 and several albums after that. He was a fundamental part of the Pretenders' success, producing their first album, The Pretenders, in 1980, and several other albums after this. In 1985, he teamed up with the Australian band In Excess and his work with them gave them a worldwide breakthrough. First album he produced for them was The Swing in 1984, and then several other albums and singles. Among other artists he has worked with are Paul McCartney and Wings, The Human League, Tom Robinson Band, Pete Townsend, U2, Pulp, Chris Spedding, The Stripes, and Mystery Jets. He has won Rolling Stone Critics Producer of the Year, Billboard Producer of the Year, plus Grammy and Brit Awards.